All righty. Well, we are back for workshop number 4, grading and incentivization. And we're here with Scott Pangrazzi again, who's used the US government simulation. He's going to be going over how he incorporates it into his class with the grades, and probably will be referencing a lot from the previous workshops, specifically the assignments workshop from last October. So with that, Scott, I know that you do a little introduction. Just want to say first off, thanks so much for being here and being willing to help out with this. And it's been great to kind of dive into this more with you. So I'm going to pass it off to you.
Yeah, and I mentioned this several times in previous ones, but I think the nice back and forth relationship between statecraft and my specific class is something that's invaluable. And so being able to work with Stefan, being able to work with the other people at statecraft, that is something that you can always lean on if you need some support. When we build these presentations, I was looking back and I was like, whoa, that whomever developed that IR plan, that's really cool. That's a full class. It is worth kind of staying up front that I use statecraft really for a 5 to 6 week period, depending on the semester. I use it as my culminating assessment. The way that I use it in class is kind of a little bit more of a condensed timeline than the IR simulation. But I think that just shows the multiple ways in which you can use this. Again, culminating assessment, I just threw out an idea the other day in one of our meetings, like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to start the year with this? And again, it wasn't like, oh no, you can't do that, or that's really not how this is built. There's a way to work this into your class at any single point and have meaningful assessment as well. Just a couple things that I do want to kind of show you once you log in on the Instructor Dashboard. Again, reviewing the US government simulation model and integrating the simulation into your class, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. The syllabus contains suggestions on how to structure your class, but there's also some other resources as well. I'll kind of take you in. I'm already logged in here on my statecraft. So when you go through the professor account and log in, you'll notice that there are a few things that you may want to make use of here. Under documents, again, and I know I pointed this out in previous ones, the sample syllabus has some suggestions in terms of grade breakdown, and that's mixing in some major assignments perhaps that you would expect to see in a standard high school course. Also within the instructor manual as well. I think in terms of the simulation setup, it can help with the flow and then give you perhaps some ideas of how you might want to use it in terms of your class, in terms of grades and incentivization. And then also the grade book as well. And this is not necessarily something like that's going to be very visual right now. But once you have all your students in there, it's a good way to kind of keep track of those sim points. Depending on how you use sim points in the class, and I'll be upfront, say I don't use sim points in terms of grading, but one of the ways I think it really does incentivize the students is their natural competition with each other, right? And trying to find a way to balance that, the fact that, hey, you do want to, win or succeed, with also that notion of, yeah, but are you doing it the right way? I had a large class for me last semester was 18 students. And so I had, for the first time, 3 media members, and they were exceptionally competitive with each other and trying to track down information and get the highest sim points. Interestingly enough, one of the students admitting, like, I kind of lost track of the ways that I looked up how to be a journalist from the resources that were provided in class. And I always see, talked about that struggle to think about those journalistic expectations, but also what to do to get kind of the main story within the game from the other 2 members of the media. So, sim points will help you track that and may help you say, like, hey, I noticed you don't have so many at this point. How can I help you? Right. Because some students, and I, Stefan and I have talked about this a lot. I've talked about this and other ones, your traditionally high achieving students sometimes struggle with, oh, I need to make a decision. Which one's the right decision? And so helping students kind of realize that it's not necessarily about right or wrong. It's about where your position goals fit and what you think you need to do to accomplish this within the simulation. And so sometimes those students that are very grade focused struggle with that notion of making a decision because they're afraid of making the wrong decision. And so sometimes you can recognize that by looking at where the sim points are after a period or 2. That can be helpful to have conversations to kind of nudge them that, hey, make a choice, make a decision here, and kind of help them with that. So jumping kind of back into our slideshow here in terms of minimum grading options. Again, this is, for me, it's a high school class. It's 10th grade. It's a standard civics course that runs for a semester. And so in terms of my grade percentage here, I do have this broken down in terms of the semester grade. I try as much as possible. We are a semester class that does like a midpoint of the semester check-in. That's kind of like our quarter one or quarter three. And I try to keep it to 100 points on each side of that. But more or less, definitely 200 for the semester so that students can keep track really easily of where they stand. And so I know in previous ones, and I've shown this, kind of my flow of how I run each period and overall. And for the XP trackers, those I make worth like 2 points each period. And that more or less works out to 3% of the grade. And that's something that they do in period 1, period 2, in period 3. Then kind of at the midway point, at the end of period 2, I have them write their justification memo, have them address somebody within their area within the game. If it's executive branch, usually it's someone within that. If they're a member of Congress, someone within the legislative branch or a campaign manager. If it's the media, I may have them address like a hypothetical editor or secretly address it to someone in another branch when they're trying to get information. If it's the ACLU president, I may encourage them to write it to their membership, right? Why are we filing this lawsuit, or why are we taking this particular stand? And the justification memo is it's a 5-point kind of, okay, let's see, can you reason why you made a decision that you did? And did you also go through the costs and the benefits? So I believe in the last webinar and the one before that, I show what a justification memo looks like, similar with the justification product and the debriefing presentation. Then in periods 3 and 4, and I give them the choice if they want to talk about something they did in period 3 or something that they did in period 4. I make this a little bit of a greater weight, 15 points, which is more or less 7.5% of their semester grade. And this actually came out of a student suggestion. I had a student who I wouldn't necessarily describe as a gamer, was really frustrated with some of the things that they couldn't do within the game. And one of the things that student said to me one day was, I wish I could write my own bill and introduce that. And I was like, well, okay, that's not necessarily something you can do in the US Gov simulation. But it is something that could showcase that you're thinking about ways in which you would find improvement, right? If you found yourself in this scenario. And so that led to the kind of the creation of this justification product, where you have the ability to actually create something and publicize it. So if the justification memo is an internal consideration of the choices that you made, the justification product is an external way to show how students might be working outside of the game. So if you're a member of Congress and you've had frustration getting other members to do certain things for you, maybe you can introduce a law and write that up, a brief overview of what you would want to be able to have Congress do. If you are the president, you can give an Oval Office address about one of the major outcomes in the simulation and inform the American public. You can write an executive order directing one of the other executive branch members to perform a particular action that maybe you can't directly do in the game, but you have communicated at some point to someone, hey, you need to do this for us to accomplish our shared goal. Media members, they can write a news story. They could do a news broadcast. They can work with a member of Congress or with the president and do an interview, so that it gives students an opportunity to work across groups and work together and collaborate. And then the ACLU, they can sit down with an interview with media. They can asked to be invited, or Congress can invite them to a congressional committee hearing, and they can talk about one of the issues and the ACLU's position on it as an expert. They can write up a draft lawsuit for something that they wish they had the opportunity to sue the government for in the game, and try to prevent the erosion of civil liberties that sometimes happens within the simulation. And so, a way to get them to practically think about it. I've had campaign managers, and sometimes campaign managers struggle a little bit with, well, how much should I be doing? And the fact that they're mostly advising their candidates and hoping their candidates are going to do things that are going to help them get reelected. I've had a campaign manager make an entire merchandise store focused on reelecting a particular individual. I've had campaign managers create social media templates, and what would they post on Instagram about particular issues or their support for particular positions as a candidate. So getting them to actually create something that they can't necessarily do inside the simulation, but is inspired by or a part of something they did. And that's usually done by the end of period 4. So they could turn it in during period 3 or period 4, which usually we spend a week and a half, 2 weeks on in class. And then finally, everybody does the debriefing presentation. And I know I've showed this in a previous webinar, but this is something that I take the questions that Statecraft has developed and just kind of tailor it around our exam period, and put, kind of different stipulations. There's a way to write a debriefing paper that exists within the resources for teachers. So you can either do the presentation or the paper. For my particular class, kind of the time crunch that we have around exams, a presentation makes a lot of sense. And so that's kind of what we do. And it's this opportunity for students who've really kept their positions very close to themselves to kind of share that with. And there's usually a lot of aha moments in the crowd, like, oh, this is the person I needed to work with and I missed that, or that person would give me that piece of information. If I had that would have changed something I would have done. And as you can see, that's the major substantial kind of assessment of the class that equates to about 17.5% of their semester grade. And I did want to talk about bonus points. I generally keep this connected to the XP tracker grade. And what I mean by that is not giving bonus points for depth on the XP tracker, but the one nice thing that Statecraft will do is they'll send you reports each week, and they'll kind of identify, here's generally what happened. They'll give you a summary, but then they'll identify 3 students that they think would benefit from a little bit of a nudge from you. Like, hey, these students could participate more, could be more active. But then they'll give you 3 students who, hey, these students really put in a lot of effort this period and were very active. And generally, that's where I might bump up a student's grade and give them an extra point if they show up on that list of the students who are kind of going above and beyond. And that's kind of how I might work in bonus points to how I use it in my class. In terms of other assessments, I did want to put up, again, the IR examples from Stefan's portion of the presentation, because I think they're really great ideas. I just put a little note here to the side and say, I personally struggle with this. To provide deliberate incentive outside of success in the simulation. And then again, extrinsically, the assignments that they need that impact a student's grade. So one of the goals I'm going to kind of give myself that hopefully I'm a little bit more motivated to do this time is to try to incentivize and pick one of these to kind of bring over into my US Gov simulation. Because there are a lot of different ways to do this, right? You hope always it's going to be that intrinsic value. And sometimes you see it. I know I've talked about different examples of students that have been pretty reserved throughout the entire class, and all of a sudden just you almost can't get them to stop talking about it, or you find them in moments in the school where they're in a heated conversation with someone else from class, and they look at you and like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I guess he's seen me interact outside of class and this, and it is a nice feeling to see that. But maybe I could incentivize a little bit more deliberately. And then the way I do look at incentivization, give the students the opportunity to work together, make assignments that allow students to be a reporter, a member of Congress, president, ACLU, et cetera, and create something that allows each student to highlight what they've learned, right? Find a way. There's always a way, right, in government for them to connect with each other, whether it be through the structures of government or through the way that we as citizens or watch dogs kind of look at what government does to make sure that they're not overstepping their duties and responsibilities. Find ways for those different groups to interact. And then give students the opportunity to showcase their learning in ways that aren't often considered to be academic. And I mentioned this earlier, creating the merch store as the campaign manager, or social media accounts, or giving an Oval Office address. I have students that are really strong performing artists, and they gravitate towards those opportunities. When early in the semester we're mostly doing essays, or maybe taking a quiz, or producing a project that doesn't allow them to kind of get into those things. And then encourage them to explore cross-discipline solutions. I know in the IR one, working with an art teacher, working, perhaps with a performing arts teacher, or getting together with a science teacher. There's a lot of opportunities. Math, there's a lot of opportunities to bring somebody else into this. And maybe those things happen organically, which is sometimes what has happened with me, where students will be like, hey, I'm doing this in another class, I want to bring it in. Or you can make it more formal and bring those people into your class, and have them experience it. So yeah, I'll pass it back over to Stefan.
Let's
And
yeah, I
as
got
always, go back and go back and view the other webinars. I know I referenced them a few times. So
I got a couple questions for you.
yeah,
If we could jump back to the slide about the grading options, because I
sure.
know, a real
Yeah.
important point of your classes, currently at least,
Mhm.
is that you don't give homework outside of classes.
Yeah. Mhm.
And looking at the
Mhm.
justification memos, justification product, and the tracker, period
Yep.
3 seems to have a lot of emphasis in terms of there's a lot due in that time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you make time for that, and how do you make sure that the students are able to buy in the ways that they see fit in that time frame?
Yeah. I think the one thing is I do set aside the entire class for this when we get to this. This is the culminating unit. Everything we do is geared towards the simulation. And so I don't necessarily have to worry about bringing in new content. It's more about recalling students to previous units or previous things we studied. And so one thing I do is you'll notice I don't do an XP tracker for period 4. And so if students are really interested in something that happens in period 3, they have the ability to work on the justification product until the end of period 4. So when they get into period 4, I don't add in supplementary resources I don't have them spend as much time breaking down their briefing. I'm not collecting an XP tracker or a justification memo. And so they have time in that period to not only think about that product and perform their actions in period 4, but for the debriefing presentation, and thanks for bringing me back to this because I neglected to mention this. I give them the debriefing presentation. I say it here in the timeline, but I didn't mention it. I introduce this to the students at the beginning of the simulation, and I walk them through it. So students have been thinking about that question that they select, hopefully from the beginning. They've been taking screenshots in the simulation of their actions and kind of cataloging them so that they could build. And I often say this because period 1 and period 2 is actually a little bit light on work, and so they have an opportunity to start building their presentation from the beginning. And so a lot of students who are in tandem completing their XP trackers, writing their justification memo, taking screenshots in each period, and building that presentation as they go. And that's kind of how I would say I balance it, if that makes sense.
So, like, if it's a class that does have homework as an expectation, those
Yeah.
students could potentially be doing this outside of class,
Yeah.
in preparation, and then that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Mhm.
Cool, yeah, thank you for digging deeper on that. Appreciate it.
Sure. Hmm.
Well, yeah, I guess at that point, just to kind of wrap things up here, want to make sure that those of you who are interested in continuing to learn more about statecraft or even use statecraft, here's some next steps for you. Set up your simulation. You can sign up for a US government instructor account for free. You can set up your simulation. You can access a lot of the instructor materials as soon as you want to actually use it in the classes when you need to pay for it. So let me know. I'm happy to help you with that or the statecraft support. Join our subreddit. We have a lot of our assignments that we've gone through. All of these have been posted there from previous workshops, so please definitely check them out there. You can register for the next and last workshop. This the instructor controls. That's the duplicate right there. We'll be going a little bit into the back end of the sims, see what possibilities exist. How can you use those to support you as someone navigating and trying to understand what's happening in the sim. And then also you can register for the instructor competition, which happens in spring. We're doing an IR and a US Gov. And so all that's on the website. If you have any questions, reach out to us. But besides that, thanks so much for your time. And Scott, thank you for your time and your willingness to dig into this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure if my email is attached to the Reddit or not, but if any teachers have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I know that via the resources there, you could always, hit the comment button or whatever. And I'm happy to, we just sat down to talk about our simulation for the end of the semester here. So it's getting towards that time where we're back into it. So looking forward to it.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, take care, y'all. Thanks so much.